The real test was navigating a galaxy where powerful forces, 6 months after Una passed the Kavathi Crucible, the galaxy faced a real crisis. A border dispute between the Thelonian Commerce Federation and the Dravek Empire escalated into open warfare. What started as a legal argument about mining rights turned into military confrontation. The conflict threatened to drag the entire coalition into its first multi-species war in over a century. The cause was almost ridiculous. Both species claimed ownership of an asteroid belt based on ancient treaties. The belt contained valuable minerals, but not enough to justify a war. The real issue was pride and old resentments. The Thelonians viewed the Dravek as primitive brutes. The Dravek saw the Thelonians as weak cowards who hid behind technology and commerce. Generations of cultural prejudice turned a legal dispute into a military crisis. What started as legal arbitration became military posturing. Ships from both sides began aggressive patrols near the disputed territory. Then came the first shots. A Thelonian scout ship fired warning shots at a Dravek mining vessel. The Dravek responded by destroying the scout ship. Suddenly, both governments were mobilizing their fleets. War seemed inevitable. The Academy went into emergency protocols. Thelonian and Dravek cadets were immediately separated to prevent violence. Classes were suspended. The High Council debated whether to evacuate human cadets entirely. Humans were neutral, but their safety could not be guaranteed if the Academy itself became contested territory. The atmosphere was tense and fearful. In the midst of the panic, Una did something unexpected. She submitted a formal proposal to the High Council. She wanted to lead a mixed team of cadets, including both Thelonian and Dravek members, to attempt a diplomatic intervention. The proposal was immediately rejected. Council members called it naive and dangerous. Ambassador Kylris told her bluntly that real warfare was not a simulation. Real beings would die. Her success in the Crucible did not qualify her for actual diplomacy. But Una refused to give up. She began recruiting a team anyway. Jinho agreed immediately, offering his technical expertise for communications and support. Kesh, the Vrathan warrior who had learned to trust Una during the sabotage incident, volunteered as well. Finding a Dravek and a Thelonian was harder. Most cadets from those species were too caught up in patriotic fervor to consider cooperation. Finally, Una found 2 candidates. A Dravek cadet named Thorax had lost his sibling in the opening skirmishes. He was consumed with grief but also with anger at the stupidity of the conflict. His sibling had died over an asteroid belt that neither government actually cared about. The waste of it made him willing to try something different. A Thelonian cadet named Saris came from a prominent merchant family with connections to both governments. She understood that war was bad for business and worse for civilizations. She was pragmatic enough to see value in Una's proposal. The team of 5 was itself a political statement. 5 species working together while their governments prepared for war. Belzora, watching from behind the scenes, used her influence to get them transport to the disputed territory. It was not official approval. The Academy could not formally endorse their mission. But it was not prohibition either. If they succeeded, the Academy could claim credit. If they failed, they were just unsanctioned cadets acting on their own. The journey to the disputed asteroid belt took 3 days aboard a civilian transport. The tension inside the ship was suffocating. Thorax and Saris barely spoke to each other. When they did interact, old prejudices surfaced immediately. Thorax called Thelonians cowards who bought their way out of conflict. Saris called Dravek barbarians who solved every problem with violence. It took all of Una's diplomatic skills to keep them from actual physical fighting. Those diplomatic skills came from experience, not training. Una had grown up in New Busan's slums, where gang territories overlapped and conflicts erupted daily. She had learned to mediate disputes between groups that hated each other. She learned that people could work together, even when they did not like each other. They just needed a common goal that mattered more than their mutual hatred. The asteroid belt was a frozen war zone when they arrived. Both fleets maintained standoff positions with weapons ready and sensors constantly sweeping for threats. The disputed mining facility sat on a large asteroid designated TH-47. The facility was modest, employing maybe 100 workers. But it had become symbolic. Losing it meant losing face. Neither government would back down. Yuna's team broadcast their approach on all frequencies. They identified themselves as Academy cadets on an unsanctioned diplomatic mission. Both fleet commanders responded with variations of the same message: turn back or be fired upon. Yuna ignored the warnings. She plotted a course directly between the two fleets. It was a calculated risk. Firing on an Academy vessel would violate multiple treaties. Both commanders would have to either shoot at cadets or allow them passage. They made it to the mining facility without being destroyed. The facility manager, a pragmatic Thelonian woman named Veska, initially refused to let them dock. Her voice over the communication channel was tired and frustrated. I have 60 Thelonian workers and 40 Dravek workers trapped here. Both governments have ordered evacuation, but each insists the other side's workers must leave first. We are hostages to political pride. Listening to Veska, Yuna understood the real problem. It was not about the asteroid or mining rights. Both governments had backed themselves into positions where compromise looked like defeat. They needed a way to back down without appearing weak. They needed a solution where both sides could claim victory, or at least a solution where both sides could avoid the appearance of loss. Inside the mining facility, conditions were tense. The workers had been trapped for weeks, watching their governments escalate toward war. They feared being killed in crossfire or used as bargaining chips. Thelonian and Dravek workers eyed each other with suspicion and fear. The facility was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Yuna gathered all the workers together, both species in one room. She presented a radical proposal. The workers themselves would claim independence. They would form a cooperative and declare the asteroid autonomous territory. According to coalition law, Jinho had researched obscure precedents. Mining collectives could declare autonomous governance under certain emergency conditions. If the workers formed a cooperative and petitioned for coalition protection, the asteroid would become neutral territory. The idea was legally questionable and practically insane. But it had one crucial advantage. Neither government could claim the asteroid without looking like they were attacking civilians. Both could save face by claiming they protected worker rights and prevented the other side from seizing territory. It was not the victory either government wanted, but it was not humiliating defeat either. Cirrus used her family's merchant network to make things happen quickly. Within hours, she arranged for neutral coalition observers to witness the workers' declaration. Her family had connections throughout the commercial sectors of both governments. Those connections proved valuable. Thorax spoke to the Dravek workers, in their own language, explaining that declaring independence was not surrender. It was tactical victory. They were not losing the asteroid to the enemy. They were denying it to both governments equally. Kesh used her Vrathan military credentials to establish direct communication with both fleet commanders. She did not threaten or plead. She simply explained the mathematical reality. If the workers declared independence and both governments respected it, both could claim they prevented the enemy from seizing territory. It was not the victory either wanted, but it was better than the alternative, a long costly war over worthless rock. The declaration was broadcast across all channels. 100 workers, 60 Thelonian and 40 Dravek, stood together and announced the formation of the Free Collective of TH-47. They petitioned the coalition for observer status and neutral protection. They thanked the Academy cadets who facilitated their peaceful resolution. The message was carefully worded to give both governments an honorable exit. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Both fleets remained at battle stations. If either side fired a shot, the fragile peace would shatter. The galaxy held its breath. Diplomats argued in emergency sessions. Military commanders calculated odds and risks. Then slowly, one ship powered down its weapons. Then another. Then a dozen more. The Thelonian government released a statement, praising the humanitarian achievement of protecting worker rights. The Dravek Empire declared it a victory for pragmatic strength over empty posturing. Neither government admitted fault. Both claimed moral superiority. But the war was over before it truly began. Yuna's team had done the impossible. They had given both sides a way to choose peace without looking weak. Aboard their transport heading back to the academy, the team was exhausted but elated. They had prevented a war. Thorax and Ceres still did not like each other much, but they had developed mutual respect. They had seen that cooperation was possible even between enemies. Jinho joked that they should bottle Yuna's problem-solving method and sell it. Kesh, usually serious, actually laughed. When they returned to the academy, they expected celebration. Instead, they found controversy. The High Council was deeply divided. Some members praised. News traveled fast through the academy. Within hours, everyone knew what Yuna had done. Within days, the entire coalition heard about the human cadet who passed the impossible test. The reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of celebration, there was controversy. Instead of praise, there was anger. The Vrathan Military Council sent an official complaint to Earth's coalition delegation. They argued that Yuna had destroyed civilian infrastructure. According to their interpretation of military law, destroying the orbital elevators should disqualify her result. The Thelonian Commerce Federation was even more upset. Their entire economy depended on orbital elevators. They threatened to remove all their cadets from the academy. Several species said that allowing Yuna's success would encourage dangerous behavior. At the academy cafeteria, Yuna found herself in a strange position. Half the cadets treated her like a celebrity. A group of massive reptilian Dravek warriors bought her drinks and toasted her bravery. They said she had the heart of a true warrior. They respected anyone who could think differently and win against impossible odds. But at the next table, a group of elegant Meridian cadets deliberately turned their backs to her. The Meridians were the most prestigious species in the coalition. They had the most advanced technology and the longest military tradition. They did not appreciate humans changing the rules. Yuna tried to eat her meal quietly. The attention made her uncomfortable. She had not expected this reaction. She thought passing the test would prove that humans belonged at the academy. Instead, it seemed to make things worse. She felt more isolated than before. Jinho could not stop thinking about what had happened. His engineering mind needed to understand how Yuna's solution worked. For 3 days, he barely slept. He spent every spare moment analyzing the simulation data. He broke down every decision Yuna made, every command she gave, every second of the 45-minute test. What he discovered changed everything. The Cavati Crucible contained hidden programming. It was not just measuring tactical decisions. It was analyzing the philosophy behind those decisions. The simulation's artificial intelligence had been designed to counter any pure military strategy. Every cadet before Yuna had approached it as a military problem. They asked how to win with insufficient resources. The AI was built to defeat that kind of thinking. It was unbeatable if you tried to fight it on military terms, but Yuna had not approached it as a military problem. She had treated it as a humanitarian crisis. She asked a different question. How do I maximize survival when victory is impossible? The simulation's AI had no programming for that approach. The Cavati designers, in their logical insectoid thinking, had never considered that distinction meaningful. They saw military victory and civilian survival as the same goal. Yuna had shown they were not. Jinho found Yuna in her dormitory room. She was sitting on her narrow bed, still holding Thelzora's honor scar. She looked exhausted and overwhelmed. Jinho sat down beside her and showed her his analysis on his datapad. You did not just pass the test, you revealed a flaw in how the entire galaxy thinks about warfare. That is why they are scared. Yuna stared at the data but did not really see it. 340,000 died, Jinho. I know it was a simulation. I know they were not real people. But those decisions would have killed real people if it was an actual battle. 340,000 beings with families, with dreams, with lives. Jinho did not know what to say. He wanted to tell her that she saved 1,660,000 more. He wanted to say that sometimes hard choices were necessary, but he could see the pain in her eyes. She was not celebrating her success. She was mourning the cost. The Academy's High Council called an emergency summit. The council chamber was enormous, a spherical room where representatives from 40 coalition species floated in customized atmosphere bubbles. Each species needed different environmental conditions. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others needed methane or ammonia or even vacuum. The bubbles allowed them all to gather in one space. Ambassador Kael'rus presided over the summit. His ancient exoskeleton reflected the chamber's soft bioluminescent lighting. Yuna was summoned to testify. She stood on the central platform, feeling impossibly small. Around her floated some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy: military commanders who had won great battles, diplomats who had negotiated historic peace treaties, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel, and she was just a cadet from Earth's slums. Lord Admiral Shenval spoke first. He was Meridian, a being made of pure, crystallized thought. His words came through harmonic frequencies that translators converted to language. His argument was elegant and devastating. She did not win. She merely delayed defeat. By coalition standards, this is failure. Her result should be invalidated. Yuna listened to the argument. She understood it intellectually. By traditional military standards, she had failed. The colony's defenses were destroyed. The infrastructure was ruined. The casualties were horrific. If this had been a real battle, historians would call it a disaster. But something about that argument felt wrong to her. It missed the essential point. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was quiet, but the acoustics of the chamber carried her words clearly to every floating bubble. With respect, Lord Admiral, you are correct. I did not win. But 1,660,000 beings went home to their families because I delayed defeat long enough. In human terms, that is not failure. That is the only victory that matters. The chamber erupted in debate. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly disagreed. Some supported Yuna's validation. They argued that the coalition needed new perspectives. Others demanded that traditional standards be maintained. They said that allowing this result would undermine military discipline across the galaxy. Then something unexpected happened. Thelzora spoke. She stood in the Vrathan delegation bubble, her forearms crossed in a gesture of deep respect. This was a salute that Vrathan warriors reserved only for those who had saved their lives in battle. The human speaks truth. We of the Vrathan have fought 1,000 wars. We have won great victories and survived terrible defeats. But we have forgotten the purpose of both. War is not an end. It is a means to preserve life, even when that life is not our own. Thelzora's words carried weight. The Vrathan were respected warriors. They had been part of the coalition longer than most species. When a Vrathan warrior spoke about the purpose of war, people listened. The debate continued, but the tone shifted. More voices began supporting Yuna's position. Finally, Ambassador Kael'rus raised a chitinous claw for silence. As the eldest member of the council and the designer of the crucible, his opinion would carry the most weight. The chamber fell quiet. Everyone waited for his decision. Cadet Kim's result stands. The Kavathi crucible will be retired, not because it was beaten, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. It has revealed a truth the galaxy needed to learn. We have become so focused on victory that we forgot why we fight. We fight to protect life. When protecting life requires accepting military defeat, that is not failure. That is wisdom. The decision was final. The crucible was officially retired. Yuna's success was validated. But as she left the council chamber, she did not feel victorious. She felt the weight of responsibility. She had not just passed a test, she had changed how the galaxy thought about warfare. That was far more significant and far more frightening than she had expected. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She went to the Academy's observation deck. It was late and the deck was empty. She stood at the transparent wall, looking down at Therium Prime. The gas giant's clouds swirled in endless storms, beautiful and indifferent. The storms did not care about cadets or tests or philosophical debates. They just existed. Jinho found her there. He always seemed to know when she needed company. He stood beside her without saying anything for a while. Then he spoke quietly. Everyone is talking about you like you are a hero. Yuna kept staring at the storms. 340,000 died, Jinho, in the simulation. I know it was not real. But those decisions would kill people in a real battle. Real people with families. With dreams. With futures. You saved 1,660,000 more. Jinho's voice was gentle. That has to count for something. Does it make it right? Does saving more lives justify the ones I sacrificed? Jinho did not have an answer, neither did she. These were the questions that kept her awake at night. These were the questions that would follow her for the rest of her career. She had proven that impossible tests could be passed, but she had also learned that passing came with a cost. Victory was never as clean or simple as the stories made it seem. Real decisions involved real consequences, and those consequences would haunt you, simulation or not. They stood together in silence, watching the storms of Therium Prime. The galaxy had changed. Traditional military thinking had been challenged. New possibilities had opened. But for Yuna, the personal cost of her achievement was just beginning to become clear. She had wanted to prove that humans belonged in the coalition. She had succeeded. But now she carried the burden of being the one who changed everything. That burden felt heavier than any medal or honor. 3 weeks passed since the summit. The Academy was still dealing with the aftermath of Yuna's success. The Cavathi Crucible was gone, retired after 200 years. For generations, that test had been the measure of tactical genius. Now it was just history. Various species factions were scrambling to establish new standards. Each faction wanted standards that favored their own way of fighting. Politics, as always, infected everything. Yuna's daily life became uncomfortable. After the third death threat, the Academy assigned her a personal security detail. 2 armed guards followed her everywhere. The threats came from a Meridian supremacist group. They published a long manifesto claiming that humans were corrupting galactic military tradition. They called Yuna a dangerous influence. Half the Academy treated her like a celebrity. The other half treated her like a criminal. There was no middle ground. During an advanced tactics seminar, Yuna noticed something strange. The guest instructor was Admiral Kavarek, a famous Thelonian commander. He spent the entire session subtly attacking human military philosophy. Every example of reckless decision-making came from human history. Every cautionary tale about emotional leadership featured human commanders. It was careful and methodical, too careful to be accidental, but it was subtle enough that filing an official complaint would seem paranoid. Jinho noticed it too. His curiosity turned into obsession. He started investigating the pattern of anti-human sentiment at the Academy. What began as casual interest became something more serious when he discovered encrypted communications between several instructors and coalition military officials. The encryption was sophisticated, military-grade security. It took him 4 sleepless nights to break it using techniques he learned from Earth's gray hat hacker communities. What he found made his blood run cold. There was a coordinated effort to discredit human cadets across the entire Academy. The conspiracy was subtle and systematic. Humans were being assigned to teams that were designed to fail. They received equipment that malfunctioned during important tests. They were evaluated by instructors known for bias against humans. It was not obvious discrimination. It was statistical. Over time, the data would show that humans consistently underperformed. Not enough to prove deliberate sabotage, but enough to justify limiting human participation in coalition military leadership. The conspiracy traced back to an organization called the Meridian Preservation Committee. Officially, they were dedicated to maintaining coalition military standards. Unofficially, they focused on preventing humans from gaining influence in the military hierarchy. The organization was not government-sanctioned, but its membership included 3 High Council members, 24 flag officers, and at least 17 Academy instructors. They had resources, connections, and a clear goal. Jinho brought the evidence to Yuna. They met in a maintenance tunnel beneath the Academy's main complex. It was one of the few places where surveillance was weak. The tunnel was dark and smelled of recycled air and lubricants. Jinho's datapad glowed in the dim light. They are scared of you, not just you specifically. They are scared of what you represent. If humans can rewrite the rules of warfare, what else might we change? Yuna read through the encrypted messages. Her hands shook slightly. This was bigger than she thought. This was not just about her or even about human cadets. This was about power, and who got to define what proper military leadership looked like. The conspiracy wants to maintain the status quo. They want things to stay exactly as they have always been. The conspiracy escalated during the midterm combat trials. These were week-long field exercises on Therium Prime's largest moon. Cadets were divided into squads and given objectives. The exercise tested leadership, adaptability, and cross-species cooperation. Yuna was assigned to lead a mixed-species squad. Her team included Jinho, 2 massive Dravik warriors, a Thelonian communications specialist, and a Vrathan tactical officer named Kesh. Kesh made her feelings clear from the beginning. She openly resented being placed under human command. The Vrathan were proud warriors with ancient military traditions. Being led by a human cadet, especially one as young and controversial as Yuna, felt like an insult. The tension in the squad was immediate and obvious. From the start, things went wrong. Their equipment developed problems. Weapons misfired at critical moments. Environmental suits developed small leaks that drained power. Navigation systems drifted off calibration. Any single issue could be explained as bad luck or poor maintenance. But together they formed a clear pattern. Someone wanted them to fail. On the third day, Kesh confronted Yuna. The Vrathan warrior was angry, her forearms gesturing sharply. "This is deliberate. Someone wants us to fail. Someone wants you to fail. I do not like humans. I do not like serving under your command, but I respect competence. And this sabotage is incompetent. It is dishonorable." Yuna made a decision. She could report the sabotage to the instructors. But the instructors might be part of the conspiracy. Reporting it could make things worse. Instead, she did what she had done in the Kavathi Crucible. She changed the parameters of the problem. The squad abandoned their assigned objective. Instead, they used their malfunctioning equipment to track which opposing team had been shadowing them. They backtracked carefully, using Jinho's technical skills to identify electronic signatures. They found the opposing team and captured them. More importantly, they captured that team's intact equipment. The squad confronted the opposing team leader, a Meridian cadet named Telkaris. Yuna had Jinho record everything. She made it clear that they had evidence of deliberate sabotage. She gave Telkaris a choice: admit who gave the orders, or face charges of violating Academy honor codes. Telkaris broke quickly. He was young and scared. He admitted that Instructor Kavarek had given him explicit orders to ensure Yuna's squad failed, not to win fairly in the exercise. To sabotage, to make sure the human cadet looked incompetent. Telkaris had not wanted to do it, but Kavarek was powerful. Refusing would have ended Telkaris's career before it started. Yuna now had proof. Recordings, testimony, logs of equipment tampering. She faced a difficult choice. She could report everything and trigger a formal investigation. That would expose the entire conspiracy, but it would also create a massive political crisis. Species would take sides. The Academy might not survive the scandal. The coalition itself could fracture, or she could use the evidence as leverage. Handle it quietly. Fix the problem without destroying the institution. It was the kind of impossible choice that had no clear right answer. Both options had serious consequences. Yuna requested a private meeting with Master Instructor Thelzora. They met in Thelzora's personal quarters. The space was equal parts meditation chamber and armory. Weapons lined the walls, each one representing a battle or achievement from Thelzora's 40-year career. Yuna presented the evidence methodically. Encrypted communications, Telkaris's testimony, equipment tampering logs, everything. Thelzora's reaction was controlled rage. Her scale shifted to a darker blue, a Vrathan sign of deep anger. This is not just conspiracy against you. This is an attack on the Academy itself, on everything we claim to represent. Merit, honor, unity. She studied Yuna with intense eyes. Why bring this to me? Why not to the High Council? Because the Council is part of the problem. Yuna's voice was steady. 3 council members are in the Meridian Preservation Committee. If I go public, this becomes a political war. Species will choose sides based on politics, not facts. The Academy might not survive, but if you handle it quietly internally, we can fix the system without destroying it. Thelzora made a sound that might have been Vrathan laughter. You seek a tactical solution to a political problem. Very human, also very wise. She leaned forward. But there is a cost. If I act quietly, those responsible may not face full justice. Some will merely be reassigned. Others will escape with their reputations intact. Can you accept that? Justice matters less than fixing the system. Yuna met Thelzora's gaze. Punishing individuals while leaving the conspiracy intact accomplishes nothing. The structure is the problem, not just the people. Thelzora nodded slowly. She made several encrypted calls from her quarters. Yuna could not hear the conversations, but she could see the intensity in Thelzora's body language. Within 48 hours, things began to change. Instructor Kavrek was suddenly reassigned to a remote outpost on the edge of Coalition space. 2 High Council members quietly resigned, citing personal reasons. The Meridian Preservation Committee did not disband. That would be too obvious and would raise questions. But its leadership changed completely, and its funding sources mysteriously dried up. The conspiracy was not destroyed. Yuna understood that. You could not eliminate prejudice and fear with a few reassignments, but the conspiracy was weakened. Its ability to coordinate action was broken. It would take years for them to rebuild, and by then the academy would be different. More humans would have graduated. More success stories would exist. The narrative would be harder to control. Yuna's squad received top marks for the field exercise. They were praised for their innovative problem-solving and effective teamwork. But the victory felt hollow to Yuna. She had learned something important and disturbing. Passing the Kavathi Crucible was just the beginning. The amphitheater fell silent. 400 cadets from 37 different species sat perfectly still in their seats. Master Instructor Thelzora stood at the center stage, her 8-foot frame covered in blue scales that caught the light. Her forearms crossed in front of her chest. Everyone knew what was coming. The Kavathi Crucible, the test that no one had ever passed. Yuna Kim sat in the upper rows, her heart beating faster than normal. She was small compared to most beings here. At 23 years old, she was one of only 15 humans at the Galactic Coalition Naval Academy. Humans were new to this place. They had only joined the Coalition 100 years ago. Many alien species still thought of them as primitive and violent. Thelzora's voice boomed across the amphitheater. It was deep and powerful, the kind of voice that commanded respect. She began calling names. Each cadet who heard their name would face the crucible within the next month. Some names brought gasps from the crowd. These were the best tactical minds in their class, the ones everyone expected to achieve greatness. Then Thelzora spoke again. The name she called made the entire amphitheater erupt in whispers. Cadet Yuna Kim, a human. Many cadets turned in their seats to stare at her. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked like they pitied her. Everyone knew the statistics. 200 years of the test. 14,000 attempts. 0 successes. Not one cadet had ever passed. Yuna stood up slowly. Her best friend Jinho Park sat beside her. He was human too, tall and thin with nervous energy. He gave her a small nod. His smile was meant to be encouraging, but she could see the worry in his eyes. Jinho was brilliant with technology and engineering, but even he knew this test was different. This test broke people. She walked down the long stairs toward the simulation chamber. Each step felt heavy. Behind her, she heard the whispers growing louder. Someone said humans were too emotional for tactical command. Someone else said she would embarrass her entire species. A third voice said it was cruel to give her this test at all. Thelzora watched Yuna approach. The instructor's face showed no emotion. She had trained thousands of cadets over 40 years. She had seen them all fail this test. Some failed with dignity. Others broke down completely. Thelzora believed the test was sacred. It taught humility. It showed cadets that some problems could not be solved. Sometimes accepting defeat was the only option. Yuna reached the bottom of the amphitheater. Thelzora spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. The Kavathi Crucible will test everything you think you know. It will test your tactics, your resource management, and your ability to make impossible choices. You will fail. The only question is whether you fail with honor or with fear. The simulation chamber doors opened. Yuna stepped inside. The walls immediately came alive with holographic projections. Within seconds, she was no longer standing in a room at the academy. She was on a command deck of a small defensive platform orbiting a colony world. Through the view screen, she could see the planet below. It was beautiful with blue oceans and green continents. 2 million people lived down there. Her tactical display showed the situation. Yuna felt her stomach tighten. She had 3 outdated frigates, old ships with weak weapons and thin armor. The enemy fleet was approaching. 50 modern cruisers, fast, heavily armed, and aggressive. They would arrive in 45 minutes. Reinforcements were coming to help her, but they were 6 hours away. The math was simple and brutal. She could not win this battle. The colony below had no way to evacuate. Their ships were civilian transports, slow and unarmed. If Yuna's defense failed, 2 million people would die. The simulation made everything feel real. She could hear the worried voices of her crew. She could feel the vibration of the platform's engines. She could smell the recycled air. Back in the amphitheater, the other cadets watched on large screens. This was the moment that always happened. The moment when the cadets' confident expression collapsed into despair. They all waited to see Yuna's face change. They waited to see the fear and hopelessness appear in her eyes. But something strange happened. Yuna's expression remained calm. She did not look afraid. She looked focused. She began giving orders. Her voice was steady and clear. But she was not trying to win the battle. Everyone could see that. She was moving her ships in a pattern that made no tactical sense. She positioned them near the colony's orbital elevators. These were massive structures that connected the planet's surface to space. They took decades to build and cost fortunes. They were considered sacred under galactic law. No one ever damaged them deliberately. 15 minutes into the simulation, Yuna did something that shocked everyone watching. She ordered 2 of her frigates to crash into the orbital elevators. The explosions were massive. The elevators broke apart, their pieces spreading across the orbital space around the planet. Debris began creating a dangerous cloud. The amphitheater erupted in shocked voices. Some cadets stood up from their seats. Even Thelzora's 4 hands clenched into tight fists. Someone shouted that Yuna was insane. Another voice said she was destroying what she was supposed to protect. The rules of warfare were clear. You did not destroy civilian infrastructure. You did not sacrifice the very thing you were defending. This was not just failure. This looked like madness. But Yuna was not finished. She used her last frigate's tractor beam to push and pull the debris. She was creating patterns in the wreckage. She was building corridors and dead zones. When the enemy fleet arrived, they had to navigate through this deadly maze. Their large cruisers could not move well through the debris field. They had to slow down. Some ships took damage from collisions. The perfect formation of the enemy fleet fell apart. Yuna had bought time. Not much time, but some. She immediately contacted the colony's government directly. She bypassed all the normal military channels. This violated at least 3 dozen protocols. She told the colony leaders to start evacuating immediately. Use every ship they had. Civilian transports, cargo vessels, personal shuttles, even small pleasure craft. Get as many people off the planet as possible. The evacuation was chaotic. It was disorganized and inefficient. Ships launched without proper flight plans. Some collided, others broke down. But people were leaving. Thousands at first, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. The enemy fleet was still fighting through the debris field and people were escaping. Time kept passing. 5 hours and 30 minutes. The enemy fleet finally cleared the debris. They had taken losses, but they still had overwhelming force. Yuna had only a few orbital defense platforms left and they were running on emergency power. This was the moment when every previous cadet had watched helplessly as the colony burned. The moment of ultimate failure. Yuna did something else that no one expected. She sent a broadcast on all communication frequencies. She was not talking to the enemy fleet. She was talking to the entire galaxy. She identified the attacking fleet by their ship signatures. She revealed that they were targeting civilians who were evacuating. She declared that any species that attacked refugees would face human retaliation. She cited an obscure law from humanity's coalition membership treaty. The law promised unlimited military response to war crimes. It was a bluff. Everyone watching knew it was a bluff. Humanity's fleet was small and scattered across many systems. They could not really threaten the enemy. But something happened in the simulation. The enemy commander hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. The reinforcements arrived, the simulation ended. Numbers appeared on the screen. Final casualty count 340,000 civilian deaths. It was a horrific number, a devastating loss. But 1,660,000 people had survived. The colony's infrastructure was destroyed, but the colony itself still existed. By every previous standard, this would be considered a catastrophic failure. But Yuna had done something no cadet had ever done. She kept the colony from complete annihilation. The amphitheater was absolutely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Then something extraordinary happened. Ambassador Caelrys stood up. He was ancient, an insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected centuries of wisdom. He was Kavathi, the species that had designed this test 200 years ago. He had never spoken publicly about the Crucible before. His voice was translated through harmonic speakers. The test was never about winning. It was about recognizing that some battles cannot be won, only survived. Every species that attempted this test sought victory. Only one species looked at inevitable defeat and asked a different question. How many can I save? Telzora walked down to the simulation chamber. Her face was unreadable. Yuna stood at attention, exhausted, expecting to be punished for violating so many protocols. Instead, Telzora reached up and removed one of her 17 honor scars. These were small metallic pins that Vrathan warriors wore to commemorate battles where they had survived against impossible odds. To give one away was the highest honor a Vrathan could bestow. Telzora placed the pin in Yuna's hand. The human cadet had passed the impossible test. The galaxy would never be quite the same. The High Council convened a formal tribunal to address the unauthorized intervention in the Thelonian-Dravek conflict. The proceeding was officially called a disciplinary hearing, but everyone understood it was a trial. Not just a trial of 5 cadets, but a trial of the entire philosophy they represented. The future of human participation in coalition military leadership hung in the balance. The tribunal took place in the Academy's Grand Judicial Chamber. The space was designed to intimidate. The walls displayed projections of coalition law stretching back centuries. 43 High Council members presided, their various forms creating a strange gallery of galactic diversity. Crystalline energy beings floated beside methane-breathing behemoths. Insectoid diplomats sat near mammalian commanders. Yuna, Jinho, Kesh, Thorax, and Saris stood in a central dock designed for beings much larger than humans. Another subtle reminder of their place in the galactic hierarchy. The prosecution was led by senior council member Veltara, a Meridian with 3 centuries of diplomatic experience. Her crystalline form pulsed with controlled light as she presented the charges. The team had violated direct orders. They endangered coalition neutrality. They exceeded their authority as cadets. They established a dangerous precedent that individual initiative could supersede governmental processes. Veltara acknowledged their good intentions. But good intentions without authority create chaos. If every cadet, every junior officer, every individual believes they can rewrite policy through personal action, we have anarchy. The coalition survives because we respect structure, protocol, and collective decision-making. These cadets, however well-meaning, represent a threat to that order. The prosecution recommended severe punishment, expulsion from the academy, permanent prohibition from coalition military service, formal censure in each cadet's permanent record. It was career death, not just for the 5 of them, but potentially for future human cadets who might be judged by association. Master Instructor Telzora mounted the defense. She had taken the unprecedented step of formally representing the cadets. Her opening statement was characteristically direct. I have trained warriors for 40 years across 17 conflicts. I have seen courage and cowardice, brilliance and foolishness, honor and treachery. These cadets demonstrated all the qualities we claim to value: initiative, tactical creativity, cross-species cooperation, and commitment to preserving life. If we punish them for embodying our ideals, we admit those ideals are hollow. Telzora presented evidence systematically. The High Council had been deadlocked for weeks on the Thelonian-Dravek crisis with no viable solution. Established diplomatic protocols had failed repeatedly. She provided testimony from fleet commanders on both sides. They grudgingly admitted that the cadets' intervention prevented escalation into broader war. But Telzora's most powerful argument was not about success. It was about necessity. The coalition faces a fundamental question. Are we a collection of species bound by rigid adherence to outdated protocols? Or are we a living alliance that adapts to new challenges? These cadets did not act recklessly. They acted when inaction meant catastrophe. Ambassador Caelrys added his perspective as a non-voting observer. When I designed the Kavathi Crucible 200 years ago, I believed no species would ever solve it. I was wrong. Cadet Kim revealed a flaw in how we conceptualize leadership. The question before this tribunal is not whether these cadets broke protocol. They did, The question is whether breaking protocol to save lives should be punishable when protocol itself has become the obstacle to survival. Yuna was called to testify in her own defense. She stood before the assembled council members, acutely aware that her words might determine not just her future, but the future of human participation in coalition military leadership. She could not match Veltara's legal expertise or Thel Zora's military credentials, so she spoke from personal experience instead. I grew up in the slums of New Busan. Every day was survival. You learned quickly that rules mattered less than results. If you followed protocol when a gang was coming for your family, you died. But you also learned that violence was not the answer. The families who survived were not the strongest. They were the ones who found solutions everyone could accept. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When I took the Kavathi Crucible, I did not try to win because I knew winning was impossible. I tried to save as many as I could. When my team went to the asteroid belt, we were not trying to force peace. We were trying to give both sides a way to choose it. I do not know if that makes me a good officer, but I know it is what I would want someone to do if my sister was trapped on that mining station. Veltara interrupted. Your personal experiences are noted, Cadet Kim. But personal ethics cannot supersede collective governance. You admit you broke protocol. You admit you exceeded your authority. What makes you believe you had the right to do so? Yuna's response was quiet but firm. I do not believe I had the right. I believe I had the responsibility. When you see a problem you can solve and you do not act, you are still making a choice. You are choosing an action. If I was wrong to act, then punish me. But do not punish the idea that sometimes rules need to be broken to serve the purpose those rules were meant to protect. The chamber fell silent. The council deliberated for 3 days. During that time, the academy was paralyzed with tension. Factions formed. Thelonian and Dravik cadets bonded by the fact that 2 of their own stood trial. Organized demonstrations supporting Yuna's team. Meridian cadets and traditionalist species organized counter-demonstrations arguing that discipline must be maintained. The verdict was delivered by Ambassador Kael'ris, speaking for the council majority. This tribunal has considered the charges and defense. We find that the cadets did violate established protocols. However, we also find that their actions prevented significant loss of life and demonstrated exceptional qualities of leadership and cross-species cooperation. He paused, building tension. The cadets are hereby censured for exceeding their authority. This censure will appear in their permanent records. However, they are also commended for exemplary service to the coalition. They will not be expelled. Instead, they will be transferred to a new program. The announcement of a new program created immediate confusion. Kael'ris explained. The coalition was establishing an experimental unit called the Crisis Response Initiative. It would operate with greater autonomy than traditional military units. The program was designed specifically to handle situations where conventional protocols had failed. The team's success in the asteroid belt crisis convinced a slim majority of the council that such flexibility, carefully controlled, could be valuable. After the verdict, the 5 cadets were given 48 hours to decide: accept transfer to the Crisis Response Initiative, or continue their traditional academy path, with permanent censures on their records. The choice came with significant implications. If they accepted, they would be pioneers in an untested program that could either revolutionize coalition military doctrine or become a cautionary tale. The team met in the Academy's observation deck to discuss their decision. Thorax spoke first. I came to the Academy to become a traditional Dravik fleet commander. This crisis response initiative is not what I envisioned, but after serving with you all, traditional service feels limiting. Cirrus added that her family expected her to enter diplomatic corps, not experimental military units. But the tribunal made clear that the old ways are failing. If we want to shape the future instead of being shaped by it, we need to take risks. Kesh pointed out the tactical reality. The coalition is offering us a chance to legitimize what we have already proven we are good at, finding unconventional solutions. If we refuse, someone else will take that role and might not do it as well. Jinho grinned with nervous energy. I am in, obviously. When else am I going to get authorization to hack into diplomatic networks legally? All eyes turned to Yuna. Her decision would carry the most weight. She stood quietly, staring at Therium Prime's swirling storms through the transparent wall. Finally she spoke. I did not come to the Academy to be a hero or revolutionary. I came because my sister and I made a deal. I would chase this impossible dream so she could stay home and take care of our family. I promised her I would make it mean something. She looked at her teammates. The Kavati Crucible taught me that sometimes the only way to win is to change what winning means. The tribunal just told us the entire coalition is facing that same lesson. If we walk away now, we are saying we only care about breaking rules when it is convenient. But if we commit to this crisis response initiative, we are accepting responsibility for making it work. She pulled out the worn photograph of her sister that she always carried. I am in. Not because I think we are special, but because someone needs to prove that doing the right thing does not have to mean choosing between following orders and following conscience. The team made their decision unanimous. They would accept the transfer. As they submitted their formal acceptance to the High Council, Thelzora met with them one final time as their academy instructor. She placed her 4 hands together in a gesture of deep respect. You have chosen a difficult path. The Crisis Response Initiative will have many who want it to fail.